والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين. So somebody asked what was the third thing that made knowledge blameworthy. So it can harm somebody else, it can harm yourself, or there's just no benefit in it at all. It's a waste of time. Like trivial knowledge. There's people that know trivial things that have no... Aristotle said it's better to know a little bit about deep things than a lot about shallow things. Bismillah. So the next section is the fourth chapter. So we finished the first three. The fourth chapter is on في سبب إقبال الخلق على علم الخلاف. He's going to go into the psychology, the reasons why people have gone into knowledge of differences and this obsession with differences. And then also to go into detail about the dangers of argumentation, dialectic, and when it is permissible to debate, the conditions. So one of the things that he begins by just letting us know that the khilafah of the Prophet ﷺ, he said after the Prophet left, and the Prophet ﷺ was not only teaching those things that are necessary to live a fully human life. So the Prophet ﷺ taught us how to pray, which is obviously devotion is our purpose, and so that's the most important thing. But he also taught the things about eating, about dress, modest dress, eating healthfully, minimalizing what we eat, not eating too much. He taught how to interact with people, akhlaq, all of those things. But he also was a ruler. And he differs from Isa, for instance, in that, because Isa alayhi salam never ruled. He was a prophet, but he never ruled. And that's why sometimes Christians will criticize the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for aspects of his life on earth. And those criticisms are largely due to the fact that he was a ruler. And so he made judgments that rulers make, and he made the best judgments because he was the best of rulers. But Jesus was never a ruler. So it's much easier to have an idealized view of Christ in their mind, because we don't know what he would have done had he been a ruler, had he had the power to act as a political leader as well as a prophet. But our Prophet ﷺ did. He had to deal with military situations. He had to deal with treason, which is a capital crime in the governments of the world. So the fact that he had people put to death for treasonous reasons, people can fault him. That doesn't sound like a prophet. No, that doesn't sound like your prophet, because your prophet was never in a position where he was forced to make a ruling like that. And so this is one of the aspects of our prophet that is very important to understand, that he wasn't just a religious leader. He was a military leader. He was a military commander. He was a political leader. He was a father. Jesus wasn't a father. Again, you can idealize people that don't have the problems that go with households. The transparency of our Prophet ﷺ is that his marital problems are in the Quran. And people say, well, why is that? Well, because that's part of life. And he came to teach us all aspects of life. And one of the aspects of life is sometimes you're going to have problems in the house. So how do you deal with it? Domestic violence? No. That wasn't his way. So those aspects. So what he says is that the Prophet ﷺ was a political leader, and then he trained these men who, when they took power, they were capable of not only ruling as politicians, but ruling as politicians following a prophetic methodology. And so Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and these are the four that are agreed upon according to Al-Sunnah, that they were Mahdiyun. They were rightly guided. Khulafa Rashidun, Mahdiyun. And then most of the ulama add to that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz as a fifth exemplar. And then historically there have been others that come close to the prophetic model, but don't go under that عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي. They don't fall under that category that the Prophet ﷺ defined, that we should follow their sunnah as well. Because why? Because they're on the methodology of the prophets. So people like Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi is an example of a prophetic leader. He was following the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. Uthman Dan Fodio in Nigeria is another example of a prophetic Amir who's really attempting as a scholar and as a statesman to implement the methodology. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi is another example of that. He's an exemplar of prophetic practice. Unfortunately, we have far fewer than we would like. But our civilization, in terms of just pure human legacy, I think has far more examples of benevolent and enlightened leadership than other pre-modern civilizations. So that's also in our favor, but it doesn't mean that there weren't serious problems. So what he says is that they were able to judge as exemplars of the prophetic methodology. So they didn't need recourse to ulama. And so he said because of that reason, the ulama were not involved in politics. They were involved in ilm al-akhirah. That's what their concern was. It wasn't about the dunya. But as these leaders who had knowledge began to disappear, then they began to rely on fuqaha, because they were no longer faqih. Because according to our tradition, the imam should be a mujtahid. So the political leadership should actually be a mujtahid. He should be able to decide what the hukm shar'i, the legal ruling, is in any given situation. That changed, but during the time, for instance, of the Tabi'een, they still had rulers. Even during the Umayyad period and the Abbasid period, the rulers generally were highly educated Muslim scholars as well. And many of them loved the company of grammarians, of literary scholars, poets, because they had great knowledge of language. Now, a lot of them can barely put two sentences together. In fact, some of them, if they just applied for a job as a doorman at a good hotel, they probably wouldn't get the job. It's amazing how they got into power, which shows you tu'ti mulkum man tasha, you know. You give dominion to whomever you please, including the gardener, you know, or the son of an Ethiopian shepherd. Huh? Amazing. You know, Obama in Ethiopia, because he's from Luo tribe, you know the Luo tribe is a tribe in Ethiopia. A Luo tribesman could not get elected president in Kenya because of his tribe. You can ask any person from Kenya, except maybe a Luo, but you ask everybody else, and they'll tell you that he couldn't get elected in Kenya just because of his tribe. But how do you get... You give it to whomever you please. If that's not a proof of that verse, I don't know what is. I mean, a man whose middle name is Hussein, and his last name rhymes with Usama. Amazing. So what he says is that what happens is the fuqaha, when they saw, he's saying that these ulama were distant from governments and they avoided. Abu Hanifa, all of our imams, the four imams, all of them had difficulties with the government. All of them. people would not take judge, they didn't want to be judges. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, there's 3 qadis, 2 of them are in the fire. So 2/3 of judges are in the hellfire, not good odds. So nobody wanted to be a qadi. They didn't want to be a judge. Abu Hanifa, they tried to force him to be a judge, and he said, I'm not qualified. And they said, you're a liar. And he said, well, that proves I'm not qualified. So that's called the Cretan's paradox in philosophy, right? All Cretans are liars, said the Cretan. So if it's true, he's not lying. So what he says, فَرَأَى أَهْلُ تِلْكَ الْعَصَارِ عِزَّ الْعُلَمَاءِ وَإِقْبَالَ الْأَئِمَّةِ وَالْوُلَاةِ عَلَيْهِمْ. So people saw this esteem that these ulama, these scholars were held in by the rulers because they were distant from the rulers. They weren't after their money. They weren't after positions of power. And so the rulers, they had to honor them for that. And so because of that, so he says, فَأَشْرَبُّوا لِطَلَبِ الْعِلْمِ. So then they begin to raise their necks. Like, that's something we should do. Because if we get that, we'll get the izz. You buy the car, you get the girl that goes with it. It's marketing, right? I mean, that's all those commercials. So this is, they saw, oh, these ulama, look how high they're held in esteem. If we get the knowledge, that's going to happen to us too. So they sought knowledge for the wrong reason. And he said this is the beginning of the decline, right? Is that they wanted it for the wrong reasons. And then they tried to get near to the rulers. And فَأَصْبَحَ الْفُقَهَا بَعْدَ أَنْ كَانُوا مَطْلُوبِينَ طَالِبِينَ. After they were sought after, they become seekers after the dunya. وَبَعْدَ أَنْ كَانُوا أَعِزَّةً بِالْإِعْرَاضِ عَنَ السَّلَاطِينَ أَذِلَّةً بِالْإِقْبَالِ عَلَيْهِمْ. They were dignified in avoiding the rulers. Now they've become debased and degraded by seeking them out. إِلَّا مَنْ وَفَّقَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فِي كُلِّ عَصْرٍ مِنْ عُلَمَاءِ دِينِهِ. Except for those who had success from Allah in every time. وقد كان أكثر الإقبال في تلك الأعصار على علم الفتاوى والأقضية. People wanted to learn fatawa and aqdiya, meaning the science of fiqh to give fatwa, legal opinion, responsa, and then also legal judgments. I'll give you an example. In Mauritania, a lot of young students now, they go to learn tuhfat al-ahkam before they study like Khalil, and they want to learn how to be a judge because there's such a dearth of people that know this anymore. So if you learn that and master that book, then you can get, for instance, a job in the Gulf, in one of the Maliki countries or something like that. So that's an example where people used to study because they wanted to learn the knowledge, to be knowledgeable. And one of the nice things about the Mauritanian madrasa is the scholars traditionally did not necessarily go into knowledge as a field. Many of them would end up becoming merchants or they studied because they were zawaya, because they were the Brahman of that society, and they did it as a responsibility that they felt, that I should learn my religion. So when you lose that, then you get this problem. So he's saying that what happens is that people opened up the door of vying for positions. And part of this is the need to become adept at argumentation, because you want to prove that you're better, that you know more than the other, right? This becomes the competitive marketplace. And so things began to change. And so he then talks about that this is the main incentive behind this desire to learn all of these differences and the sciences of argumentation, and the nufus, the egos, began to incline towards those who had a lot of dunya, and so they wanted to prove themselves. And so this is why they went this way. And so now he says he's going to clarify what the talbis of this is. You know, in other words, how they've been tricked into this. So he says, اعلم أن هؤلاء قد يستدرجون الناس إلى ذلك بأن غرضنا من المناظرات المباحثة عن الحق ليتضح. So they will fool the people by saying, no, the real reason why we're studying this is because we want the truth. And this is the way that the truth is made clear. فإن الحق مطلوب وتعاون على النظر في العلم وتوارد الخواطر مفيد ومؤثر. That this is the way knowledge is increased and it's beneficial. وهكذا كان عادة الصحابة رضي الله عنهم في مشاوراتهم. And this is the way the Sahaba were. So in other words, what he's showing you is that they're, in order to get out of their cognitive dissonance, they're justifying in their own minds all of these things. But these are just justifications for going after dunya, right? And they'll say these are the things that are important to learn. So he says, وَيُطْلِعُكَ عَلَى هَذَا التَّلْبِيسِ مَا أَذْكُرُهُ. And now, if you really want to understand the deception behind this, I'm going to explain it now, how the deception works. So he's going to give you the psychology of why what they're saying is not true. وهو أن التعاون على طلب الحق من الدين ولكن له شروط وعلامات ثمان. He says, the ta'awun, the cooperation in arriving to the truth in this religion has conditions, and it has 8 signs. So if they're sincere, these conditions will be filled and you will see these 8 signs. So the first sign, الأول أن لا يشتغل به وهو من فروض الكفايات من لم يتفرغ من فروض الأعيان. That he's not being preoccupied with it, knowing that it's a collective responsibility and he hasn't fulfilled the individual responsibility. So that's the first sign. So somebody who's learning Tuhfat al-Ahkam, which is a collective responsibility, and he hasn't studied the Fard Ain well enough. And he'll say, no, but he's trying to get to the truth. He said he's a kadhab, he's an inveterate liar. And the likeness of him is like somebody who leaves the prayer for himself and he begins to trade in cloth and textiles, saying, the real reason I'm doing this is so that the people who pray won't be naked. He's not praying, but he's saying, the reason I'm selling cloth is so people that pray won't be naked, right? So this is the same thing. It's a trick. So that's the first one. And then he says the second, أَلَّا يَرَى فَرْضَ كِفَايَةٍ أَهَمَّ مِنَ الْمُنَاظَرَةِ. That he doesn't see the fard kifaya as more important than the munadhara. فَإِنْ رَأَى مَا هُوَ أَهَمُّ وَفَعْلَ غَيْرُهُ عَصَى بِفِعْلِهِ. So, if he knows that it's not more important and he still does it, then he's betraying the reality of it. وكان مثاله مثال من يرى جماعة من العطاش أشرفوا على الهلاك وقد أهملهم الناس وهو قادر على إحيائهم بأن يسقيهم الماء فاشتغل بتعلم الحجامة. So the likeness of this guy is somebody who sees people about to die of thirst, and instead of getting them water, he says, I need to learn cupping because they need a cupper. And he says that the Prophet ﷺ, and this is a very important hadith, and another one, he says, and about fatwa, he says, you'll see people learning how to give fatwa, and yet they don't have doctors in their area. So instead of studying medicine, which is a fard kifaya, they're studying this, right? So ta'ayyan alayhi, because a fard kifaya that's not fulfilled becomes a ayn. You see, it's an ayn on the people capable of doing it. So if a fard kifaya is not being fulfilled, if somebody's able to fulfill it, it's an individual obligation on him. And if he doesn't, he's the sinner. And he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, Anas relates that it was said to the Prophet, مَتَى يُتْرَكَ الْأَمْرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيُ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. When will people stop commanding, or when will commanding good, stop or end, and forbidding evil will be left off. فقال عليه الصلاة والسلام إذا ظهر الإدهان في خياركم والفاحشة في شراركم وتحول الملك في صغاركم والفقه في أرذالكم. It's an amazing hadith. That when you see flattery in the best of you, when you see the best of you just flatter each other, and foulness in the worst of you, al-fahishatu, and that's sexual deviancy usually, but just low class behavior. And then mulk becomes in the least of you. Sigarikum, which could mean in age, it could mean in intellect, it could mean in stature. Sigar, just the least of you. So those who rule over you are the least of you. They're not the best of you. وَالْفِقْهُ فِي أَرْذَالِكُمْ. And fiqh is now in the lowest of you. And this is one of the big problems in our time with respect to people that study Sharia. In most Muslim countries, in fact, I don't know of any exceptions with the exception of families, like Shaykh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, for example, comes from a family of scholars, and so his father made sure that he was a scholar. You'll find that. But generally, the people that go to Sharia schools and Sharia colleges are the people that couldn't get into any other schools. That's simply a fact. And it's a tragedy, but that is simply a fact. The third, أن يكون المناظر مجتهدا بذاته يفتي برأيه لا بمذهب الشافعي وأبي حنيفة وغيرهما حتى إذا ظهر له الحق في مذهب أبي حنيفة وترك ما يوافق مذهب الشافعي وأفتى بما ظهر له كما كان يفعله الصحابة. So he's saying that the one who's doing this, he has to be a mujtahid. In other words, if he's really seeking the truth's already been established in the madhabs. So if you're not a mujtahid, you're supposed to follow an opinion that was done by a mujtahid. You don't have any business doing this. وَأَمَّا مَنْ لَيْسَ لَهُ رُتْبَةِ الْإِجْتِهَادِ, and this is very important. So the one who has not achieved this level of independent reasoning, وَهُوَ حُكْمُ جَمِيعِ أَهْلِ الْعَصْرِ, and this is the ruling of all the people of our time. وَإِنَّمَا يُفْتِي فِي مَا يُسَرُ عَنْهُ نَاقِدًا عَنْ مَذْهَبِ صَاحِبِهِ, then he is supposed to give fatwa, a legal opinion, from the madhab of whoever he follows. فَلَوْ ظَهَرَ لَهُ ضَعْفُ مَذْهَبِهِ لَمْ يَجُزْ لَهُ أَنْ يَتْرُكَهُ. Even if it appears to him that his position is weaker, he should not leave it. فأي فائدة له في المناظرة ومذهبه معلوم وليس له الفتوى بغيره. So what's the point of his debating if his madhab is already known and he's not a mujtahid, so he's not supposed to go outside of his madhab? And this is the traditional position. These are the greatest ulama of our ummah have said this. Imam al-Laqani, Ibrahim al-Laqani, وواجب تقرير ومالك وسائر الأئمة كذا أبو القاسم هداة الأمة فواجب تقرير حبر منهم كذا حكى القوم بلبن يفهموا. That Malik and the other Imam, he was Maliki, Malik and the other Imams, that you have to follow one of them. Wajibun, right? تقرير حبر منهم, that you have to follow one of them. And this is what the Qawm has said. The ulama is what they've said. Now, in this enlightened time with all these great scholars, people are saying, no, you don't have to follow a madhab. I mean, here's Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, who wrote the book on usul al-fiqh, al-Mustasfa. I mean, that's the umda of usul al-fiqh is his book. The Hanbali madhab, their book is the book of Ibn Qudama, Rawdat al-Nadhir. You ask any Hanbali, which book did you study in usul? If he's a Hanbali scholar, he'll say Rawdat al-Nadhir. What is Rawdat al-Nadhir? It's an abridgment of Imam al-Ghazali's book. Seriously, it's an abridgment of his book. He wrote the book on usul al-fiqh. He could have made ijtihad, and he's saying, if you're not a mujtahid, you have to follow the opinion of the imam. Now people say, why is that? Why do we have to follow the opinion of the imam? Here's the hadith, here's the ayah. Why do we have to follow the opinion of the imam? Well, first of all, here's the problem. If you take any ayah and you ask 10 people, even if they have, let's say they have a modern degree from a university, from an Arab country, you ask them, what does this mean? What does this verse mean? You're going to get 10 different opinions. It's just a fact. And a lot of them, they won't know. And if you ask them to make i'rab of the ayah, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't. Just ask them. Right? Well, what is that? Why is that like, لَا يَنَالُ أَحْدِي الظَّالِمِينَ? What's al-zalimin? What is that? What's ahdi? What's the ya called? I guarantee you ask people, you'll see, right? So, if you don't have people that spent years mastering these sciences and you unleash this thing and say, everybody just work it out for yourself, you're supposed to be a mujtahid, not a muqallid, taqreed is madmoom. It's true, taqreed is a negative term in our religion. It's a low maqam, right? It's not a positive term. But if you open this, if you unleash it and let it out, well, welcome to the modern world. Welcome to the Islamic Dawla of Iraq. Seriously, welcome to the Islamic Dawla of Iraq. That's what they're doing. They're opening here it says crucify people. Let's crucify them. It says cut off their heads. Let's cut off their head. ضرب الرقاب يا أخي. ضرب الرقاب. ما تفهم؟ رقبة. ضرب. Seriously, it's a disaster. يا أخي في البخاري Sayyidina Ali, go to every grave and flatten it. إيش هذا مولانا رومي؟ إيش هذا؟ حرام يا أخي. والله شوف الحديث في البخاري. It's right there. The Prophet told me to go and flatten every grave. They were the graves of the mushrikeen in Najd that they used to worship. هم يعبدونهم هنا. That's what they're doing here. So, anybody here worshiping that grave? I never saw a Muslim worshiping a grave. I never saw that. Really, I saw some people doing stupid things. That's true. I saw once somebody making tawaf around a grave. That doesn't mean he's worshiping. I made tawaf around the Kaaba. I'm not worshiping the Kaaba. Seriously, it's a bid'ah, muharrama, and you should tell them to stop. But you don't blow it up. So this is the problem. If you don't follow these rules, and then they say, those madhabs, they were good for that time. We're in a new time. That's true. There needs to be tajdeed, but who does it? Who does it? Every Tom, Dick, and Abdullah? Is that who does it? Seriously, who does it? Some guy that has a 4-year degree from Al-Azhar? Who does the ijtihad? That's what he's warning against. So this is a major problem that we have. If you're not a mujtahid, you have no business doing this munadhara. Know your place. مَا مِنَّا إِلَّا لَهُ مَقَامٌ مَعْلُومٌ. Even the angels, they say, everybody has a maqam. What's your maqam? Part of being an intelligent human being is knowing your place, is knowing where you fit in the scheme of things. And arrogant people always put themselves above their place. Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said in his Qawa'id that من يدعي رتبة ليست له فضح بشواهد الامتحان. Whoever claims a station, a rank that's not his, God will expose him. You claim to be firqa najiyah, you claim to be the sole group that's saved, Allah's going to expose you for the liar that you are. Right? You claim to be this, that, or the other, Allah will expose you, simple as that. And he said, whoever claims a rutbah, a rank that's his, it'll be taken away from him for claiming it. If you say that you're the only one doing amr bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar, nobody else is doing it, maybe you are. But just because you claimed it, it's going to be taken away from you. Simple as that. That's the way it works. This is قاعدة. قاعدة أسسها الزروق ولم تزل أقواله تروق. It's a قاعدة. And he said, if you claim a rank less than your own rank, Allah will elevate you to a higher rank. من تواضع لله رفعه الله. If you humble yourself for the sake of Allah, Allah will elevate you. So that's important. وما يشكر عليه يلزم أن يقول لعل عند صاحب مذهب جوابا عن هذا فإني لست مستقلا بالاجتهاد في أصل الشرع. And anything that is problematic for you in your madhab, you should say, maybe he knew something I didn't know. لقد حفظت شيئا وغابت عنك أشياء. You know something, but a lot of stuff you don't know, right? I mean, I'll give you one example, just one example. You know, you see people that criticize Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu. And this modern people, they criticize Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu because he'll prefer qiyas in situations over singular hadith. Or Imam Malik radiallahu anhu will prefer the amal of Ahl al-Medina over single hadith. These aren't ignorant people. They didn't arrive at these conclusions happenstance. I mean, this came after great study, great deliberation, great intellectual gifts. And they came to those conclusions, and the ummah said, you're justified in that conclusion because you are a mujtahid mutlaq. And so we have to, even if my madhab doesn't agree with his madhab, with his conclusions, we have to say, but the nature of the world, you're not going to, رضا الناس غاية لا تدرك. To please people, it's an end that you'll never achieve. Like Joha and the donkey. He's riding the donkey, his son sitting next to him. So he passed by some people, and he said, the people said, look at that man, no compassion for his son, young boy. He's riding the donkey. The boys, Joha says, okay. He gets off, puts the boy on the donkey. They go past another group of people. Astaghfirullah, look at that boy. No respect for his father. Doesn't he have birr al-walidain? So Joha takes the boy off, and then they're just walking along. Look at those idiots. Perfectly good donkey, and they're not riding it. So he gets on with his son. They're both riding it, pass by some people. Astaghfirullah. Don't they know the Prophet ﷺ said you shouldn't give a beast a burden more than it can bear? Joha, he felt like putting the donkey on his back at that point, right? So that's the reality of people. You're not going to please people. And then if you tell them, this problem is an ancient problem. Zamakhshari, I mean, this is somebody 6th century. Zamakhshari, he said, إِذَا سَأْرُوا عَنْ مَذْهَبِي لَمْ أَبُوحْ بِهِ وَأَكْتُمُهُ كِتْمَانُهُ لِي أَسْلَمُ. If people ask me about my madhab, because he was Mu'tazili, if people ask me about my belief, I just keep it to myself. It's safer for me to do that. فإن قلت حنفيا فإن حنفيا قلت قالوا بأنني أبيح لهم الطلاء وشراب المحرم. If I say I'm Hanafi, they say, he permits alcohol. Because Abu Hanifa said nabidh was permitted, fermented nabidh. Right? So if I say I'm Hanafi, they say, he permits alcohol. وإن مالكيا قلت قالوا بأنني أبيح لهم أكل الكلاب وهم هم. And if I say I'm Maliki, they say, he permits eating dogs. And he said, and they're the real dogs. Right? Because Imam Malik, the dog is makruh in the Maliki madhab. He said, وَإِن شَافِعِيًّا قُلْتُ قَالُوا بِأَنَّنِي أُبِيحُ نِكَاحَ الْبِنْتِ وَالْبِنْتُ تَحْرَمُ. And if I say I'm Shafi'i, they say, he permits marrying daughters. And everybody knows the daughter is haram. And that's a mas'ala daqiqa in the Shafi'i madhab about illegitimate children, even though the person knows it is the valid marriage contract valid or not. And then he said, وَإِنْ حَنْبَلِيًّا قُلْتُ قَالُوا بِأَنَّنِي ثَقِيلٌ حُلُولِيٌّ بَغِيضٌ مُجَسِّمٌ. And if I say I'm Hanbali, they say, he's like heavy, hululi, believes that God moves in space, baghid, hateful, and anthropomorphic. وإن من أهل الحديث وحزبه وإن قلت من أهل الحديث وحزبه. And if I say I'm Salafi, يقولون تيس ليس يدري ويفهمه. They say, cabron, he's like a goat. He doesn't understand anything, right? That's a 6th century. It's all the same stuff, right? Everybody calling the other person names. Now they have internet to do it. It used to be you had to look for somebody. Now you can just tweet it out, get ghiba with. Now, I mean, just imagine the angels, what they're having to deal with now. Back in the old days, okay, one ghiba, he told so-and-so this. They just write it down. Now they must have computers themselves to keep track of all this ghiba. Because it's like, now you do namima to, I've got, 10 million followers on Twitter. Oh, so-and-so's this, that, and the other. And now, so you just did ghiba to all those people. SubhanAllah. So he says, إني تعجبت من هذا الزمان وأهله فما أحد من ألسن الناس يسلم. I'm amazed at this time how nobody's safe from the tongues of people. Right? He's saying that then. I'm amazed at this time how nobody's safe from the tongues of the people. And then he says that وقدم معشرا وآخر آخر على أنهم وآخرني وقدم دهري معشرا وآخرني. So my time has put forward some people and held me back على أنهم لا يعلمون وأعلموا, because I know and they don't know. So because I'm knowledgeable, I'm held back. Because they're ignorant, they're put forward. That's what he's talking about his own time. And then he says, فَمُذْ أَفْلَحَ الْجُهَالُ أَيْقَنْتُ أَنَّنِي أَنَا الْمِيمُ وَلَأَيَّامُ أَفْلَحُ أَعْلَمُ. So since these ignorant people have become so prominent in this age, I've realized I'm a meme, like I'm the letter meme, and the time I live in is أَفْلَحْ أَعْلَمُ. Aflah, he doesn't have an upper lip, lower lip, and a'lam, he doesn't have an upper lip. So they can't pronounce meme, because it's a harf shafawi. So he's saying, I'm a meme, and I'm living in a lipless age. They can't pronounce me. So he says, الرابع ألا يناظر إلا في مسألة واقعة أو قريبة الوقوع غالبا. The fourth is that he shouldn't talk about something that hasn't happened or it's about to happen. And this is the minhaj of the ulama of the past. Imam Malik used to be asked questions. He said, waqa'a, did it happen yet? They said no. He said, when it happens, come ask me. That's what he would say. In other words, I'm not going to theorize about something that hasn't happened yet. And the Sahaba, he says, used to gather together and they would discuss events and come to conclusions about them. The fifth one, he says, أن تكون المناظرة في الخلوة أحب إليه وأهم من المحافل بين أظهر الأكابر والسلاطين. The fifth is that these discussions should be in private and not in public. They should be kept in private, right? If you're really out with sincerity to make a change or something like that, you keep these things to yourself and you address the people that they involve immediately. You don't put it out into the public. فإن الخلوة أجمع للهم وأحرى بصفاء الذهن والفكر ودرك الحق. Because when it's in private, it will gather you. You'll be in a gathered state. And there's purity of thought and reason. And it's easier to achieve the truth. But when you're in a large group, then the ego wants its portion. And وَيُوجِبُ الْحِرْصَ عَلَى النُّصْرَةِ. And this means that you're covetous to win, because you don't want to make yourself look bad in front of a lot of people. محقا كان أو مبطلا, whether they're right or they're wrong. وأنت تعلم أن حرصهم على المحافظ والمجامع ليس لله. And you know that it's not sincere, that this is about popularity. وأن الواحد منهم يخلو بصاحبه مدة طويلة فلا يكلمه. And he'll be with a person in private and he won't even speak to them. But then when they go out in the public forum, they start talking. So why won't he speak to him in private? The sixth one, أن يكون في طلب الحق كناشد ضال. That in seeking the truth, he's like somebody who's looking for something lost. لا يفرق بين أن تظهر الضالة على يده أو على يد من يعاونه. He doesn't care who finds it. If you're looking for a camel and some Bedouin finds it, you're going to be happy that he found it. For it's your camel, you're going to be happy because that's what you're looking for. But in this situation, no. You want to win the debate. If you were sincere, you wouldn't care whether you won or he won. And that's why Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu said, I never argued with anybody except I actually asked Allah that He would put the truth on His tongue so that I could submit to it. Because he knew that the nafs had a portion. It's a whole other level. That's sincerity. فانظر إلى مناظر زمانك الآن كيف يسود وجه أحدهم. Look at them in their debates and argument, how they get angry when somebody else has a stronger argument and they become ashamed. وكيف يجتهدوا في مجاحدته, and how with great effort they strive to negate it. وكيف يذم من أفحمه طول عمره, and then after that he speaks ill of him for the rest of his life. I mean, this is a man who's telling you from experience. He's not making this stuff up. He lived this world. He's talking about himself. That's why it's so real, because he knew this intimately. The seventh, ألا يمنع معينهم في النظر من الانتقال من دليل إلى دليل ومن إشكال إلى الإشكال. That he doesn't prevent him from going from one proof to another proof, or from one problem to another problem. And this is in the rules of debate, because very often they would say, no, you can't introduce that. So this has to do with the rules of debate. And it's, again, he's just using it as an example of this desire to, if they were really looking for the truth, they would allow the person to introduce evidence in all situations. The eighth, أن يناظر من يتوقع الاستفادة منه ممن هو مشتغل بالعلم. That he debates the one who he thinks he can benefit from because he's preoccupied in knowledge. والغالب أنهم يحترزون من مناظرة الفحول والأكابر. Usually these people avoid debating people that are really knowledgeable because they don't want to look like fools. So they look for people that they can defeat them in argument. فيرغبون في من دونهم طمعا في ترويج الباطل عليهم. And then he said, other than these eight, there are also other conditions that are very subtle, but these are the ones that should let you know what is for God and what's for some other reason. If you understand these, you'll know when you see people debating. And then he says, وَاعْلَمْ بِالْجُمْلَةِ أَنَّ مَنْ لَا يُنَاظِرُ الشَّيْطَانِ وَهُوَ مُسْتَوْلًا عَلَى قَلْبِهِ وَهُوَ أَعْدَى عَدُوٌّ لَهُ ولا يزال يدعوه إلى هلاكه ثم يشتغل بمناظرة غيره في مسائل المجتهد فيها مصيب أو مساهم للمصيب في الأجر فهو ضحكة للشيطان وعبرة للمخلصين ولذلك شمت الشيطان به لما غمسه فيه من ظلمات الآفات التي نعددها ونذكر تفاصيلها فنسأل الله حسن العون والتوفيق. So know, in summation, أن من لا يناظر الشيطان وهو مستول على قلبه. If you're not fighting shaitan and he's got your heart, he has occupied your heart. If you're not fighting shaitan and he's occupied your heart and he's the worst enemy that you have and he's calling you to your own destruction and then you're preoccupied with debating other people about issues that the mujtahid is musib, or he's musahim, or he shares in the reward if he's not, because the musib gets 2 rewards and the wrong one gets 1 reward, so they both get a reward. So you're worried about this and your own heart's in peril? He said, you should know you're just a joke to shaitan. You're a joke to shaitan. You're nothing. And you are a lesson. You're an ibra. You're a wondrous lesson for the people of sincerity when they see you. And that's why shaitan laughs at you. He's joyful at your loss because he has immersed you in the darknesses of these faults that we have just enumerated. And now we're going to go into their details. And we ask Allah for good benefit and tawfiq. So now he's going to go into the details of this. So, اعلم وتحقق أن المناظرة الموضوعة لقصد الغلبة والإفحام وإظهار الفضل والشرف عند الناس وقصد المباهاة والممارات واستمالة وجوه الناس هي منبع جميع الأخلاق المذمومة عند الله المحمودة عند عدو الله إبليس ونسبتها إلى الفواحش الباطنة من الكبر والعجب والحسد والمنافسة وتزكية النفس وحب الجاه وغيرها نسبة شرب الخمر إلى الفواحش الظاهرة من الزنا والقذف والقتل والسرقة. Amazing statement. Know that this argumentation and this love to overcome your interlocutors or whoever you're having disagreements with, and this love to show your nobility over these people, your fadl over them, your love of being in these positions, and your desire to attract people, their attention, and pull them to you, this is the source of all foul character. This is it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Mahmud 'inda aduwillah. This is everything praiseworthy according to the enemy of Allah, Iblis. This is what he loves. And its relationship to the internal foulnesses is from arrogance and vanity and envy and vying, all of these things, hubb al-jah, love of stature, love of position, all of these things is the same as the relationship of alcohol to all of the outward things, like fornication, calumny, slander, murder, and theft. And just as the one كما أن الذي خير بين الشرب وسائر الفواحش استصغر الشرب فأقدم عليه. And just as the one who's given a choice to drink alcohol or murder or steal or something is going to choose alcohol over them because he doesn't understand the nature of alcohol. That's what leads to these other things. He diminishes the significance of alcohol because he doesn't know that it's al-khaba'ith. He said the same with these people who diminish the disease that he's just enumerated for the very same reasons. Because this is what, just as alcohol engenders all these other foulnesses outwardly, this is what engenders all those negative qualities inwardly. And there are many verses, and you will see in Rub al-Muhlikat, in the 4th section, in the quadrant that deals with destructive matters, you will see. So, now let's look at what this love of debate engenders. The first is envy. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-hasadu ya'kulu al-hasanati kama ta'kulu an-nar al-hatab. That envy devours or consumes good deeds just as dry wood is consumed by fire. So you become envious. لا ينفك المناظر عن الحسد. Because sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. Sometimes people praise him, other times they praise somebody else. So he becomes envious of those who have some benefit over him. And this is a great tribulation. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, خُذُوا الْعِلْمَ حَيْثُ وَجَدْتُمُوهُ وَلَا تَقْبِلُوا قَوْلَ الْفُقَهَاءِ بَعْضِهِمْ فِي بَعْضٍ فَإِنْهُمْ يَتَغَايَرُونَ كَمَا تَتَغَايَرُ التُّيُوسُ فِي الزَّرِيبَةِ. He said, take knowledge wherever you find it, but don't listen to the fuqaha when they talk about each other, because they are more jealous of each other like goats are jealous in the corral. وَمِنْهَا التَّكَبُّرُ وَالتَّرَفُّعُ عَلَى النَّاسِ. Arrogance. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ تَكَبَّرَ وَضَعَهُ اللَّهُ وَمَنْ تَوَاضَعَ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ. Whoever is arrogant, Allah will abase him, and whoever lowers himself and humbles himself, Allah will elevate him. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم حكاية عن الله العظمة إزاري والكبرياء ريائي فمن نازعني فيهما قصمته. That magnanimity is my izar, is a metaphor, is my izar, and exaltedness is my rida. It's what the upper, when you go on Hajj, you have the rida, the one you wear at top, and the izar, the one you wear on the bottom. So he's saying this is what covers Allah, His magnificence. And he said, so whoever attempts to vie with me in one of these two things, I will break his back. Allah says, I will break his back. And he said that you'll see the munadhir become arrogant about his associates and his peers, and they will vie for positions,